We finally got to experience the electrifying episode 2 of Marshals. The promo teases intense operations against drug cartels, and these aren't small-time criminals. These are dangerous, ruthless organizations. My gut tells me we're shifting away from self-contained, single-episode missions. These cartels could very well be the season's central villains, the thread that pulls everything together. And during those operations, I believe someone on the team is going to get seriously hurt, and Casey will be the one to pull them back from the brink. My money is on Andrea. The connection between them is already sparking. Casey opened up to her, sharing something he kept from everyone else, that he has a son. If Casey saves her life, that bond could evolve into something genuinely profound. I think we'll uncover Andrea's backstory in episode 2, and discover just how much she and Casey truly have in common. Is it too soon for Casey to open his heart again after Monica? Maybe, but if anyone could be that person for him, I believe it's Andrea. And the seeds of that story may be planted sooner than we think. Finally, I have a feeling Pete's story is also about to crack wide open. That quiet, emotional moment in episode 1, Pete staring at a photo of his daughter, lingered long after the scene ended. There's a story there, and I'd bet it's just as devastating as Casey's. These two old friends carrying their wounds side by side, that's going to make for some of the most powerful moments of the season. So, what do you think is coming in episode 2? Did the first episode leave you as hooked as it left me? Drop your thoughts in the comments. They brought Casey Dutton back from the dead. Not literally, but emotionally. A man who had buried his grief, packed away his guns, and quietly decided that the world could fight its own battles without him. And then, in one single episode, everything changed. Monica is gone. Tate is hurting. And Casey? Casey is strapping back in. Not because he wants to, but because some wounds can only heal when you stop running from them and start fighting for something bigger than yourself. Episode 1 of Marshals didn't just introduce a new show. It cracked open a story so layered, so emotionally charged, so packed with action and raw human pain, that by the time the credits rolled, every single one of us was sitting there with our hearts in our throats, already desperate for more. And now, the episode 2 trailer has dropped. And what's coming next looks like it's about to blow episode 1 completely out of the water. Drug cartels, high-stakes operations, dangerous enemies who don't play by any rules, and a team of warriors who are going to be pushed to their absolute limits. So before we tear into everything the trailer is promising us, let's make sure we fully absorbed every critical detail from episode 1, because trust me, every single moment from that first episode is going to matter deeply in what comes next. This is the full breakdown you've been waiting for. There is a certain kind of grief that doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't shout, or rage, or fall apart in public. It simply settles into a person quietly, like smoke filling a room. And before long, it has changed everything about how that person breathes, moves, and sees the world. That is exactly the kind of grief Casey Dutton is carrying when we first encounter him in episode 1 of Marshals. And the source of that grief, the devastating, soul-crushing core of it, is Monica. From the very first moments of the episode, the shadow of her absence is everywhere. It hangs in the silence between Casey and Tate. It lives in the way Casey moves through the world. Cautious, heavy, like a man who has already lost the thing that made the fight worth fighting. And then the show gives us the confirmation that so many fans had been quietly dreading ever since the Yellowstone finale left things heartbreakingly open-ended. Monica is gone. She lost her battle with cancer, a cancer directly caused by the chemical waste that had been poisoning the land and the people living on it for years. It wasn't a sudden death. It wasn't a dramatic, action-filled ending. It was slow, cruel, and completely unfair. The kind of death that leaves the people behind feeling robbed, furious, and utterly helpless. And for Casey, a man who has faced down some of the most dangerous situations imaginable without flinching, this was the one battle he had absolutely no power to win. That helplessness is what makes his grief so unbearable to watch, and so deeply human. Now, for those of us who loved Kelsey Asel's portrayal of Monica throughout Yellowstone, this confirmation stings in a very specific way. Because it doesn't just mean that Monica is gone within the story. It means she is truly gone from this universe entirely. There will be no surprise return, no flashback arc that gives her more screen time, no moment where the show pulls back the curtain and tells us it wasn't as final as it seemed. The door has been closed, and episode 1 of Marshals made sure we understood that with painful clarity. And as heartbreaking as that reality is, it serves a critical narrative purpose. because Monica's death is not just a backstory detail. It is the engine driving every single choice Casey makes from this point forward. It is the reason he eventually said yes when Pete came calling. It is the invisible force behind every mission he takes, every criminal he pursues, every innocent person he fights to protect. Monica's absence is, in a deeply powerful way, the most present thing in this entire show. What makes this storytelling choice so compelling is the way the writers have connected Monica's death to the very injustice that Casey is now being asked to fight against. She died because of chemical waste, and in episode 1, Casey ends up helping someone who suffered the exact same kind of loss. A person whose loved one was taken by that same toxic poison. That connection is not accidental. It is the show telling us, right from the very beginning, that Casey's grief is not going to be something he simply carries in silence. It is going to fuel him. It is going to sharpen him. It is going to make him fight harder and care more deeply than any other member of the Marshals team possibly could. Because for Casey, every mission is also, in some private corner of his heart, a mission for Monica. Every life he saves is a small, quiet answer to the question that has been haunting him ever since she took her last breath. What if I had been able to do more? And this is precisely why Pete Calvin's timing and his approach were so remarkably thoughtful. He didn't walk up to Casey and pitch him a career. He didn't hand him a badge and tell him the world needed saving. He understood that Casey was a man standing at the edge of a very dark place, and that the worst thing anyone could do was push him in either direction. So instead, Pete offered him a single mission, one task. No strings, no pressure, no lifetime commitment. Just one chance to step outside of the grief for a moment and remember what it feels like to be useful. To be the protector he has always been, rather than the mourner he feared he was becoming. That single decision, framed as a small, low-stakes invitation rather than a life-altering ultimatum, was one of the smartest and most emotionally intelligent moments in the entire episode. Because Casey didn't need to be convinced that fighting was worth it. He needed to be reminded that he was still worth it. And Pete, knowing his old SEAL brother the way only years of shared danger can teach a person to know someone, understood exactly how to give him that reminder without making it feel like charity or pity. That is the foundation of their friendship. That is why, even before we know anything else about Pete Calvin, we already trust him completely. So here we are, Casey Dutton, back in the field, carrying Monica in his heart with every step he takes, surrounded by a team he's still learning to trust, fighting battles that echo the exact injustice that stole the love of his life. Episode 1 didn't just set the stage. It built an entire emotional architecture that is going to support every dramatic moment, every action sequence, and every quiet human scene that this series delivers from here on out. And knowing that Monica's story, her loss, her legacy, her love, is woven into the very DNA of this show makes everything that is coming in episode 2 feel even more urgent, even more meaningful, and even more impossible to look away from. One of the most impressive things a new series can do in its very first episode is introduce an ensemble cast in a way that makes every single member feel distinct, essential, and worthy of their own storyline, all without overwhelming the audience or losing the thread of the central narrative. Marshals does this with a confidence that feels almost effortless, and by the time episode 1 wraps up, it's genuinely difficult to pick a favorite member of the team, because each one of them brings something so unique and so compelling to the table that you find yourself wanting more of all of them simultaneously. This team is not just a collection of skilled operatives thrown together for the sake of action sequences. They are real, layered, contradictory human beings who happen to also be extraordinarily good at their jobs. And that combination is exactly what separates a great ensemble from a forgettable one. Let's start with Pete Calvin, because in many ways, he is the emotional architect of this entire story. Pete is the reason Casey is here. He is the bridge between Casey's devastating past and whatever future this show is building toward. But what makes Pete so fascinating is that he is clearly carrying something heavy of his own. That moment in episode 1, quiet, almost easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention, where Pete is alone with a photograph of his daughter, his expression shifting into something raw and unguarded. That moment planted a seed that has been growing ever since. We don't know Pete's full story yet. We don't know what happened with his daughter, or what kind of pain lives behind those steady, capable eyes. But we know it's there, and we know that whatever it is significant enough that even a man as composed and experienced as Pete Calvin cannot look at a simple photograph without being visibly shaken by it. His dynamic with Casey is already one of the richest relationships in the show. Two men who have seen the worst the world has to offer, who have fought side by side in conditions most people cannot imagine, and who are now quietly holding each other up through civilian wounds that somehow hurt far worse than anything they ever faced in the field. Episode 2 is going to deepen Pete's story considerably, and I am absolutely certain that what we discover about him is going to reframe everything we thought we understood about why he brought Casey into the Marshals in the first place. Then there is Miles, and if Pete is the emotional architect, Miles is the moral compass. From his very first scene, Miles establishes himself as a man of extraordinary ethical depth. He is fiercely committed to protecting his community, ferociously dedicated to the mission, and yet, he carries the weight of every life lost on an operation with a seriousness that immediately sets him apart from the typical action hero archetype. Miles doesn't celebrate, he doesn't swagger. When the dust settles and the threat is neutralized, you can see him processing, questioning, holding himself accountable in ways that speak to a profound sense of personal integrity. That internal conflict, between the violence his job sometimes demands and the values he refuses to compromise, is the kind of character tension that writers dream about, because it never gets old. Every mission will test Miles in a different way. Every episode will push him to reconcile the warrior and the man. And watching that struggle play out over the course of the season is going to be one of the most quietly riveting subplots of the entire show. Belle is a force of nature, wrapped in controlled energy, and she is going to be an absolute joy to watch as the season progresses. What makes Belle so immediately lovable is the way she carries her toughness without ever letting it become a wall. She is sharp, she is fast, she is someone you would absolutely want covering your back in a dangerous situation, but there is also a warmth and a wit to her that keeps her from ever feeling cold or one-dimensional. Belle knows exactly who she is, and she moves through the world with the easy confidence of someone who has earned every bit of their self-assurance through real experience. She doesn't need to prove herself, and that lack of insecurity makes her magnetic in a way that more obviously aggressive characters rarely manage to be. As the season unfolds, I expect Belle's relationships with the rest of the team, particularly with Casey and Andrea, to become increasingly important. And I think we are going to see sides of her character that go well beyond the fearless, quick-witted operative we met in episode 1. And then there is Andrea, my absolute favorite, and the character who I believe is going to become the breakout star of this entire series. Everything about Andrea works. Her energy is electric without being exhausting. Her intelligence is evident in every scene without ever being made into a performance. And her interest in Casey, the way she genuinely tries to understand him, the way she creates space for him to be honest rather than guarded, reveals an emotional sophistication that makes her instantly compelling. The fact that Casey chose to tell Andrea, and only Andrea, about Tate is one of the most quietly significant details in the entire first episode. It wasn't a dramatic revelation. It wasn't a big moment. It was a small, private confidence shared between two people who are still figuring out what they mean to each other. And those are always the moments that end up meaning the most. Andrea is funny, tough, perceptive, and genuinely caring, and the combination of all those qualities creates a character who feels like she belongs in this world completely, while also bringing something entirely fresh to it. Whatever is building between her and Casey, I am here for every single second of it. Together, this team is something special. They are not perfect. They are not invincible. They argue, and they question, and they push back against each other in ways that feel authentic rather than scripted. And that authenticity is what is going to make watching them operate, both in the field and in the quieter moments between missions, such a consistently rewarding experience throughout this season. Episode 1 gave us the introduction. Episode 2 is going to give us the first real test of what this team is truly made of. If episode 1 of Marshals was the deep breath before the plunge, then the episode 2 trailer is the moment you hit the water. Because what that trailer is showing us is a significant escalation in almost every dimension. Higher stakes, more dangerous enemies, more complex operations, and a level of intensity that suggests the show is done easing us in and is now fully committed to delivering the kind of relentless, edge-of-your-seat storytelling that it clearly has the talent and ambition to pull off. The The drug cartels teased in the trailer are not background villains. They are not the kind of criminal organization that gets introduced in one episode and dismantled in the next. Everything about the way they are being framed, the scale of their operations, the sophistication of their networks, the clear suggestion that they have reach in resources that extend far beyond what the Marshals team has encountered before, points toward these cartels being the central antagonists of the entire first season. And that is an enormously exciting prospect. Think about what that means for the structure of the show going forward. Episode 1 gave us a self-contained mission. One threat, one operation, one resolution. It was a perfect introduction, precisely because it let us understand how the team functions without overloading us with too many moving parts. But Episode 2 appears to be signaling a shift. The cartel storyline looks like it is going to unfold across multiple episodes, building in complexity and danger with each installment, forcing the team to adapt and evolve as they realize they are not dealing with a problem they can solve in a single night. Multi-episode story arcs are where ensemble shows truly find their rhythm, and they are where character development accelerates in ways that single-episode missions simply cannot accommodate. The cartel arc is going to push every member of this team to their limits, professionally, physically, and emotionally. And the pressure of that sustained threat is going to reveal things about each of them that we haven't seen yet.